Rural Independent Group, Deputy Mattie McGrath.
Well, last Controller, I am pleased to be able to speak today on the second stage of the Climate Action and Carbon Development Amendment Bill 2021. I'm glad that the Minister is here with Tom Anna Correlation.
Deputy McGrath, just are you sharing your time?
No, I'm not.
No, thank you.
Thank you, that's Controller. And I look forward to a robust debate with him as well. And we understand each other and no hard feelings. And the same goes for all the members of the Rural Independent. Even Deputy O'Donoghue just asked me to ask you, Minister, when you're visiting, like visiting Lucy, visiting Limerick with him, as I think he's invited you. The bill is perhaps the most far-reaching piece of legislation to come before the Chamber in this current draw. As someone who has grown up, worked and lived in rural Ireland all my life, I am acutely aware of the fondness and the respect that rural people have for the land, hedgerows, biodiversity and environmental sustainability. And the male spirit is still alive and well when chips are down, when things are difficult, and we saw that during this recent lockdowns. Above all else, rural people have a deep sense of pride in passing on our traditions and our heritage and our way of life onto the next generation, and we value that greatly. It is within this context that I want to clarify, clearly outline my full commitment and the commitment of my colleagues in the Rural Independent Group to improving the environment and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. However, I believe that pursuing these noble objectives should not have the impact of making people poorer and harsh measures introduced on ordinary people who just want to live and live happy and peaceful. There is a better way, I believe, Minister. There must be a fairer way, a path that must be socially just and grounded on economic equality, which also achieves the required reductions in global greenhouse gas emissions. Social justice must be a central belief in this bill. You cannot have a situation of legally binding emissions passed into law for a 4-decade time window without considering these key elements, I believe, Minister. Equally, the bill aims to bring about reduction targets, 5-year carbon budgets, sectoral emissions ceilings, and annual updated climate action plan and long-term climate action strategy, with little or no actual democratic accountability to Antach Shin and so, Minister. We are elected and privileged to be elected for the time being. For instance, the expansion of the Climate Change Advisory Council under this bill will result in that 13 members, I know you last Controller welcomed this yesterday, and we differ on things like this, but I admire your, as all your contributions here for your honesty and integrity on them, will result in the 13-member bill having much more input than ordinary citizens and even democratically elected talk to Dáil. And that they are given a key assessing advisory role for Ireland's transition to zero carbon economy in 2050. And I think that's a diminution of our democracy. We believe that this bill, being rushed through the Dáil while the country is in a pandemic, without any consideration for the impact it will have on ordinary people, farmers, rural Ireland. The bill said rural Ireland and it's treated as a victim and as rogues, and that shouldn't be. We can't have a demonising, we can't have this demonising of rural people. We need more of the honey and less of the vinegar. At the very minimum, such legislative proposals should be accompanied by rigorous independent analysis into social, societal and economic impacts of such proposals and on they will impact on each other. And that Council, Minister, like we have so many quangos now has mushroomed up, and I want to see farmers on that. I want to see farmer bodies on that. I want to see rural dwellers on that. We must have people that understand and will be hugely impacted, have their input into this as well. As I said, if we had the proper scrutiny here, they would allow TDs at least the opportunity to make informed decisions and to provide for transparency around the costs and indeed the benefits associated with the far-reaching impacts of this bill. In fact, this legislation did not even contain a straightforward regulatory impact assessment of the bill. We are promised that it will be published at committee stage of the bill. Again, this serves to highlight the rushed nature of the bill. and make hay slowly, what I say. And I know we're people believe we're in a climate crisis. We're not climate deniers, but we want fairness. This legislation has one common denominator. The legislative impact will make every single Irish citizen poorer or much less off and worse off from that point of view. The bill is much more draconian than the draft bill published in October 2020. The main provisions include, if we're an objective of climate neutrality by 2050. Obviously, we're an interim target of 51% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 relative to the baseline of 2018. Some members of this House and several Green Party members were highly critical of the rural independence members not attending the Oireachtas committee, which considered the draft bill. The last town caller will know this. We have 6 members. We didn't get a lot of choice on committees because government take all the cake, and there was left in the pieces of the cake. We got a number of committees, but we didn't get anything looking at a committee like this, so we're not members. And we also know we're all busy people, and we all have our own committees to attend to. And if we decide to go to a committee that we're not a member of, you have to wait maybe hours to get in to speak. So, I mean, that doesn't hold water, and the people making those allegations should know better. They know the way the committee system works. As I said, such criticisms are grossly disingenuous and nothing more than a distraction for several reasons. Firstly, the rural independence, as I said, we have our own committees. Secondly, this bill before us is because the programme for government carved up between Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil, the Green Party, and supported by a number of regional independents. And I noticed that many of them didn't even come in to speak on the bill. I'm alarmed, country deputies, I'm alarmed at that is interested in it. Thirdly, the bill is being fuelled to keep you, Minister, and the Green Party and Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael to hold on to power, irrespective of the costs or the impact on the ordinary people or the key sectors such as agriculture and many other sectors as well. Finally, we believe that the bill will do absolutely nothing to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions. In fact, the only thing that this legislation will do is hammer Ireland's economy, cost thousands of jobs, directly and indirectly, and, as I said, harsh impositions on our people as well. Above all else, the bill is anti-rural, attacks the poor, and will do absolutely nothing whatsoever to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions. And we say that not of our mind just thinking this. We have seen independent research that backs this up by different universities. The bill and the government's actions and their messages on the climate change is riddled with hypocrisy, Minister. We hear government TDs, ministers claim that the bill will make Ireland the world's leader on tackling climate change. Do we want to be a leader in world tackling change? It's a nice aspiration, and it's a lovely ambition. But we must respect our people's right to exist, basically exist, and exist under the Constitution. As I said, Ireland, through this bill, even though we provide 0.11% or 1/10 or 1% of the global greenhouse gases emissions, is introducing potentially the most severe and utterly unachievable emission targets anywhere on the planet. So, I mean, where's the research and where's the backup for here and the common sense? Such nonsense fools no one, Minister. If we were serious about reducing the whole the world's greenhouse gas emissions, then we would be focusing on our efforts abroad and globally. Instead, the approach of inward focus of the bill will target Irish people and do nothing to reduce global emissions, in our opinion. However, deep down, this cynical government knows that. Their only objective is staying in power. They are willing to throw every single citizen under the bus, if the bus is still travelling, if it's not out of gas. Greenhouse gas emissions and are a global issue. The government approach to tokenism amounts to penalties on Irish people while turning a blind eye to what happens on a global stage, and that's blatantly obvious, Minister. We know, for example, from the 2018 Greenpeace report, and I hope you won't rubbish Jim, I know you won't, that one small power plant in China produces far in excess of all the greenhouse gas emissions produced in Ireland in Aon Bliana One. And that's stark fact. In fact, the same Greenpeace report states that the top 30 firms in China emitted more greenhouse gases than the whole of Ireland in the last decade. So why don't we look at that? I mean, we're often accused of, of not looking broadly, but that's a very broad question. We also know that China is one of the world's fastest growing economies, and that with it, the country's emissions are growing rapidly. China plans to build more power plants for every single plant that is built. Even a small one, it produces at least the same level of greenhouse gases as Ireland does in any year. So we must be serious. This serves to underline the fact that this is an issue that must be dealt with on a global scale, and we support that. The government's flawed approach aims to hammer the Irish public to a raft of carbon-related taxation measures and indeed net reduction targets, while on the other hand doing business with China, which is farcical, and turning a blind eye to their emissions problems. We must be proud people, and we were always recognised as a neutral country, and we were respected. We must have our voice respected again. For example, while claiming to be the best in the class, us here, and banning the cutting of turf under this bill, the government continues to support electricity generation at the Moneypine power plant in County Clare via the importation of coal from open cast mine in Colombia. This is utter bizarre and nonsense, Minister, and not a word talked about it. Not a word talked about it. And I was out in Moniaha recently in the bog, not too far from my own parish in County Portlaw again, see the men cutting the turf and the women, and the old tradition, practice and pastime, and a bit of heat for the winter, and that shouldn't be discontinued, and I will fight anywhere to keep them able to do that. It's easy for middle-class green activists in Dublin to propose indoor farming as we know it. Our campaign against economic growth, when the devastating consequences of both would be felt by others. And that's what it is, Minister. The Irish government hypocrisy on climate change is also exposed when it comes to the transport sector, where a lack of strategic planning has resulted in emissions that spiralled by 14 to 16% in 2020. This is mainly due to the lack of investment in public transportation across the country. And I know, Minister, and I thank you for coming to Tipperary and listening to the people, and I know that you have good aims and objectives, and you want to get more trains and more buses and rail corridors and whatever, and you're not in favour of big motorways, which I'm not either. We need small bypasses for our towns. Let them live, and don't cut them off completely. So I'm thankful that you're looking at the M20 and the M24 and looking at the impacts and the costs as well, and the impacts on biodiversity. If the government was serious about reducing emissions, they would begin by, for example, putting public transport in place across the country. We don't have it, Minister. We just don't have it. So our bus services are being cut in Cashel and through Tipperary in order to provide people with an alternative model of transport. I heard that Deputy Crowe today earlier said he cycled to the station in Clare, which was only a few miles from the cycling, and he had great. But I couldn't cycle to the station, which is 40 miles away from me. There is a station in Clare and Clonmel, but the train wouldn't get me to Dublin until 3 o'clock in the evening. Some of you be delighted, I know that I wouldn't have to listen to me here, but that's not fair to people. Further government hypocrisy is underlined by the fact that government could not even meet the lower 2020 EU emissions reduction targets, and now they want to be the best in the world by 2030. I know that with the focus on several destructive measures in this bill, which will destroy rural communities. Firstly, the bill is anti-agriculture. Global agriculture accounts for 16% of agricultural greenhouse gas, according to the Environmental DPA, Environmental Protection Agency. The agriculture accounts for 34% of the country's greenhouse gas emissions. This bill provides no special derogation for any parts of agriculture. And we saw last week then where people have heather, and I have heather, and the purple knockmeal downs and the purple heather is beautiful. And the cuckoo is there since about 2 weeks now, it's wonderful. And we farm it and have farmed it for generations. And now you're going to have that ruled out for any kind of payments. This stands, it's pathetic nonsense. The heather is rich and it's untouched. And it's there for generations and centuries. And now you want to cut people paying land that has heather on it. And what, the farmer's going to clear it away and plough the land. I mean, this is total. The one hand doesn't know what the other is doing. The result, yes, the result of this will mean that under the bill, Irish agriculture will be forced to pay much higher and a disproportionate cost than farmers in other countries. The fact that this bill makes no special provision for the agricultural sector is utterly outrageous. we're depending on farmers. We never saw it more now than this recent lockdown. It means the Climate Advisory Council and the Minister for Environment will set the targets. That means that the cuts proposed under the bill for the agricultural sector will be profound. Many fine Gael and Fianna Fáil TDs have come in here and promised that they would make a special exemption for the agri-food sector before the last general election. Where are those promises now? Gone like snow off a ditch, or gone they're going like a cat out through a skylight. The same TDs are saying locally that agriculture will be okay, using the old nod and the wink politics, the past type of measures. That's not good enough. And they come in here and criticise us for scaremongering. We're not scaremongering, we're reporting from very reputable sources. When those TDs attend the Dáil, they vote in favour of the bill and its impactful measures. Well, I have a message for those elected deputies. You cannot dine à la carte in this issue. Either you stand with farmers and local communities and ordinary people by voting against this bill, or you are for the bill. But know this, if you vote in favour of this bill, you are crucifying, sorry for using that expression, every person living in rural Ireland. And that's seen already last Friday night with the increase in the carbon tax on the fuel. And this cold weather and with the fuel subsidy gone, and people perish in their houses, and -3 forecast for tonight again. And the people didn't see this until it hit them in the cost of the oil on Monday morning. You're voting to put people out of work. You're voting to cull large numbers of cattle, and that's not scaremongering, that is fact. You're voting for higher food prices, and you're voting for high electricity prices, as we know. And I raised here earlier today, but the utility companies and the way they're fleecing customers, even though they're closed and not using it, and you ministers have denied any responsibility for it. You've told them to do a deal with the utility companies. What's the commission for? Regulation officer? What's the point having him if he's not going to step in? You're voting, and you're possibly you pass the possibility of young people, this is very important, obtaining planning permission on family-owned lands in rural areas. And young people want to house themselves and live in rural Ireland, and they respect the community. And I have to encourage, and the planners are flooded at the moment, any person who wants to build in rural Ireland to apply immediately, and the next 18 months before the new plans come out, because it'll be a no-go area. And that's putting huge pressure on the planners, but it's a fact, and they've told me that themselves. As I said, and you're voting for the ending of turf cutting, a traditional solid fuel source of ordinary people. You're either with rural Ireland, these TDs, or you're keeping your party in government. You cannot have it both ways. Game is up. Such provisions written into this bill to meet the emission reductions will destroy agriculture as we know it in Ireland. This has been well documented by research that has been conveniently ignored by the government. For example, analysis published by the Irish Farmers Journal, which is nearly the gospel in the farming community's house, treated that, a very reputable publication, on the 27th of March this year, suggests that half the cattle and cow herd would need to be culled by 2030. That's their words. And these TDs come in here and tell us that's not true. They love to quote the paper when they suits them. This would mean a cull of around 3.4 million cattle and cows. It would have the impact of a farmer with 100 cows, basically having to cull down to 50 cows. It's shocking. And that's the facts, and that wasn't contested, what was in the Farmers' Journal, by anybody. It would mean even deeper culls in 2030. The bill certainly means that an end to growing herd sizes, and indeed would completely contrast with the objectives of Minister Coveney and others telling people to double their heads only a year or two ago. The bill represents a blunt and callous approach and risks offshoring our food production to countries who are not have their emissions targets, and they can cut away the rainforests and bring in beef in here from Brazil into Europe. Countless tons of it. It's total pathetic nonsense. The bill fails to recognise that Irish farmers are the most carbon-efficient food producers in the world due to our grass-based models of food production. It is important that this sustainable production is not restricted, as it would lead to increased international climate emissions being created. The Mercosur trade deal, for example, will allow 99,000 tonnes of beef coming in here into the EU at a time when beef prices are on the floor, and we see the cartels in the beef industry nothing done to do with it. I'm almost out of time, but as I said, recently published research from Oxford University shows that food miles, or the transportation of food between countries, contributes a greater impact on greenhouse gases. And that's a fact, Minister, and you know that as well as I do. And to see now briquettes goes down the middle and so-called just transition. It's the most unjust thing to do to the families in that region. And Deputy Carol Nolan is doing her best to fight it off. We saw the impact recently on a businessman that's there for 20, 30 years developing the bike industry, and you should know, Minister. And allegations have been made that the person who got the tenders related to you. I don't pay any respect to that, because a tendering process is a tendering process and it has to be respected. But I would ask you to clear it up yourself about the connections, because it's not fair if it's not true. It's callous and wrong, quite clearly. But that man has no chance now. And you want to encourage business people like this and young entrepreneurs. We must lead our people out of this, and lead our people and give them hope, as I said, and be honest and transparent with them. And as I said, closing down the peat factory, stopping the bog cutting. I mean, the same with oil. With gas and oil all stopped and banned. We're importing it all. It makes absolutely no sense. A kindergarten child could understand that, not to mind to say us here in this Parliament.
Thank you, Deputy.